America is a melting pot of heritage and race. With so many different backgrounds, the U.S. has adapted its own culture to include many others. Thousands of people have come from all around the world seeking new opportunities, bringing with them new ideas and customs. However, these different ideas can clash and result in social reform led by pioneers with progressive ideas. The First Wave feminists were such visionaries. First Wave feminism was primarily focused on getting women the right to vote. During the long time it took to reach this goal, many women had the opportunity to take charge and inspire others. Immigrant feminists in the mix were beneficial in one key way. We went to Ellis Island to speak to Barry Moreno, the head librarian at the Ellis Island National Museum of Immigration, where he told us about the connection between immigration and feminism.
They did have an impact. The impact was such because of the population. The huge numbers of immigrant women entering the United States forced everyone to pay attention.
The First Wave feminist movement was created by white women, who created the movement for their own benefit as opposed to a selfless act. There was a great deal of resistance to immigrants, especially women being more included in American society. It is safe to say that without them, the feminist movement wouldn't have been nearly as successful as it was. One revolutionary, Mary Wollstonecraft, fueled the women's rights movement with her book, A Vindication of the Rights of Woman. This is one of the earliest works regarding feminist philosophy and pushed many women to stand up for their own rights. Another, Frances Wright, was a Scottish journalist and lecturer who actively advocated for women's rights. Her book, Course of Popular Lectures, shocked many, in which it discusses how women should have simple rights, like being able to speak in public places. Ernestine Rose, another feminist leader, was able to pass the Married Women's Property Act. This allowed married women to have ownership over their own property. The legislation of this law encouraged other state legislations to enact similar laws for women's rights. Despite their accomplishments, these powerful women, and many like them, were not fully accepted into society.
Some of the American women thought the immigrant women were inferior races, ethnically inferior, or somehow a threat to white America. Much of that was part of racism at the time, the idea of eugenics.
Feminists were no more racist than others at the time, but they still tended to work with immigrants because they had women's best interests at heart.
And certain ethnic groups were not so hot, and other ethnic groups were very superior. And this helped to influence a lot of what was considered progressive thinking at this time, because people were groping out to different scientific or pseudo-scientific ideas and theories to try to better our lives in all sorts of ways. And so that was part of the situation. So many of the feminists, I'm not saying that they were all racist, but many of them were concerned with the betterment of women.
A notable feminist that rose to fame during this time, despite the racism she faced from a few other feminists, was Emma Goldman.
Okay, now Emma Goldman was a feminist. She was born in Russia in 1869, right? And she immigrated to this country in 1885 when she was 16 years old with her family. And they settled, I believe, in Rochester, New York. And she subsequently got married to a man, and she was Jewish. She married a Jew named Mr. Goldman. So she became Emma Goldman. She wrote a great book called Living My Life, in which she talks about her experiences. But she left her husband and became a feminist. Yeah, she became very outspoken. She became a leader, major leader among immigrant women, you see. And naturally she attracted American women too, but some American women didn't like Jewish people, so there's some racism there.
At the time, religion was important to most Americans, and the majority of Americans during Emma Goldman's time were Christian. This led to Jews becoming an oppressed group, like the women as a whole. Because the two groups were so similar, many figures emerged as advocates for both groups. Two other notable Jewish feminists were Anzia Yezierska and Lily Daché. Anzia Yezierska was a successful novelist and feminist. So successful, in fact, that she would eventually become a Hollywood scriptwriter. Her feminist roots came from earlier in her life, when she became a school teacher.
Like there was a Jewish woman writer named Anzia Yezierska. And she came from Russia around the 1890s with her parents. And she wrote a book in which she talked about coming with her father and her mother and her sisters. She and her sisters grew up, and she remembers in the household, her father told her sisters, one by one, oh, I'm going to arrange for you to get married. You're going to have a husband. So he was arranging the marriages. And the sisters were terrified to question their father. And Anzio told her father, I don't want to get married. She said, no, I want to become a school teacher. And he said, a school teacher? Are you mad? He said, you have to go to learn to read and write to be a school teacher. You have to go to school and college. And she said she wanted to do that. And he said, no, 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 you're forbidden. I don't want you to get any education. You will ruin yourself for marriage. So finally, she was able to get some neighbors and some educated people to give her a helping hand. And that enabled her to go to college and become a school teacher.
Anzia Yezierska was not the only powerful woman who didn't let societal standards get in the way of her dreams.
Yeah, there are many others. There were some women that founded businesses, and you might say, there are originators. There was a woman, she was also Jewish. She called herself Lily Daché, and she made hats. She designed hats in the fashion industry. She was the leading designer of women's hats in the 20th century. And she came as a poor refugee from Poland. In 1990, well, I'll tell you what she did is that she went to Paris. She was Polish Jew. She went to Paris. She learned how to be a hat maker. That's called a milliner. And then she met an American, it was in World War I. She met an American soldier, so he fell in love with her. So she decided this is my way to get to America, my passport to freedom, So she married him in the American consulate in Paris. And he brought her to this country with him as his bride. And then they went to Philadelphia where she lived, and he was just a common worker. So she decided to get rid of him. So she left, divorced him, came to New York, saved the money, and opened a hat shop. And she made a fortune making hats.
Not all immigrant women were feminists, just like many American women weren't. In fact, most immigrants were lower class and barely had time to voice their opinions. Even so, they took the opportunity when it presented itself and started a movement for equality for all. America was where the seed of feminism was planted and watered by the rains of immigration. These different perspectives added to the melting pot that is the United States of America.